Hey, Peter, Ramana Maharshi would talk about the cave of the heart, right? And I don't know. I think he talked about like 2-finger widths away from the center and so on. And so there's a lot of systems that talk about like body sheaths. So like focusing attention on different parts of the body.
Yes.
And then noticing different like there seem to be particular qualities related to each of these parts. So that's like a matter of like navigating, right? So like well, anyways, I was playing around with going to the cave of the heart, and it's useful to just sort of sit in one of those and just do it as a sort of meditation, right?
Yeah, it can be interesting. If you notice, in the body, or actually anywhere, but for as you brought it up in the body, if you notice the sort of quality of energy that seems to be apparent in any area, in any locale, it all is different, and it all has different flavors and all that.
Yeah.
You notice that outside the body too.
Can you give an example of outside the body?
Anything. People have crystals that or plants, or colors, anything. Oh, there's all different kinds of, anything that appears in the sensory field has a certain, you could say, flavor about it.
Yeah.
But none of that is important per se in terms of, having this is superior to that or anything like that. There's no hierarchy. The main thing, as always, is to look at what this is. What is this phenomena of apparent flavors appearing in experience?
It's there is a matter of like just doing inquiry for the sake of increasing functionality, right? So, but would you say you can't necessarily do that and figure out what this is at the same time, or?
Sure, it's not a matter of figuring out what this is, but sure. You notice what this is. You don't figure it out. I mean.
Yeah, sure. But there's like there's a tactical way of exploring, or there's a way of exploring with intention of some sort of goal, or even like a.
All of that's fine, but again, as always, the point is to see what it actually is that is present when all of that's happening, or not, when it's not, when something else is happening. In other words, what's happening doesn't matter at all. So you can be doing all sorts of tactical navigation of energy fields and so on and so forth for fun and profit. But the point is, from the point of view of yoga, is to see what it is. What is this phenomena of energy phenomena appearing in experience? What is it? Yoga has one simple investigation. What is reality? And in practical terms, that means what is experience. So it doesn't matter what you're experiencing. It doesn't matter what you feel like you're doing within experience. What matters is what is experience itself. What is this that is present? What is this that is actual? That's liberating. Anything else is fine, but it's not going to liberate you. It's just more aims and actions within actuality. But all of that, without realizing what it is liable to leave you identified with yourself as being some partialized system within a system of actuality, rather than seeing what the system of actuality is and discovering that you are not a partialized entity, but you are this entirety itself, which is what enables liberation. And yoga investigation can occur in any context whatsoever. You can be busy doing all sorts of things, or investigating things, or doing anything whatsoever. And the point isn't what you're doing or not doing. The point is to see what it is that is actually happening when you're doing whatever you're doing, when whatever seems to be happening is happening.
Okay, so if in one's experience there seems to be some level of limitation, or some level of some sense of oneself as being limited and partialized,
right?
Is it like, is it best not to pay attention to that, or
well, whether you pay attention to it or not, pay attention to what it actually is.
Yeah.
The fact of the experience that you're qualifying as being of that, or that you're qualifying as being that way. Experience itself intrinsically is not any way, and yet experience itself enables any and all ways, apparent ways, to appear. So this is the point of yoga, to see that experience is beyond the ways that seem to appear within it. And then, of course, you're freed from being limited by any apparent limitation that any of these ways that it seems to be appearing imply. You know, situations that seem to be limitations and so on and so forth are like, you know, they're like circumstances appearing in a dream or something. The interesting question is not what are these circumstances and what's happening with them. The interesting question is, what is dreaming? What is this actuality of dreaming that enables these seeming conditions to appear? And when you discover what dreaming is, then you discover the relationship between what's actually happening has to what seems to be happening. When you dream, what's actually happening is dreaming, and nothing else whatsoever is happening. And yet what seems to be happening will be whatever elaborations seem to be appearing within the dream. And likewise, of course, in the waking condition or in any condition whatsoever. So what seems to be happening doesn't exist except as the primal actuality, what I call radiant presence. That's the only thing that's actually here. That's the only thing that's actually happening. Notwithstanding, it looks like all of this and all this differentiation and all this partialization and all this and that and all this you and me and all this limitation and that limitation. It looks like that, but that's not what it really is. Just like a dream looks like all the things that seem to be happening in the dream, but that's not what it really is. That's not what's really happening. The only thing that's happening when you're dreaming is dreaming itself. And then all this stuff is just, aspects of this fact of dreaming. Or to put it more generally, the only thing that's happening is radiant presence itself. And then all of this elaboration, you and me seeming to be sitting in this room and talking and having this conversation and so on and so forth, looks that way because of radiant presence. And it's not hidden. This is radiant presence. When you look at me, you're seeing radiant presence. When you hear this conversation, you're hearing radiant presence. So look beyond your interpretation of what seems to be happening to the substance of what is present. What is sound? What is light? What is thought? What is whatever, feeling? What is implication?
What is the importance there is to the cognition of this while you're navigating or just daily local life?
The importance of the cognition of what?
Of experience.
Oh, the importance is it's all important in terms of knowing what's actually happening versus being caught up in misinterpretation, which has all sorts of implications that will be problematic.
Is this sort of a imagined dichotomy that you can either in interpretation or seeing this?
It's subtler than that. You're always in interpretation. You're never not. Interpretation is always present, but in actuality, you're never in it. And so when you see that you're not in it, even though it's present. Whereas if you don't recognize what this is, then presence of interpretation is liable to feel like you're in it and you are in it.
So that seeing part, that was the question about the cognition.
Yeah.
And so is that sort of an outcome of holding the yoga, or it becomes more and more?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. Typically as yoga progresses, yoga is a peculiar phenomenon because it'll seem to consist of these flashes of insight that may be very difficult to pin down what they are. They seem to come and go. But then simultaneously with that, there may seem to be a sort of a subliminal development of a sort of a knowing that may seem to gradually build up in the background of your experience. That you could say it's aligned with or resonates with what is discovered or what is revealed in these flashes of insight.
Interesting way to put it. Generally, you don't recommend too much intentionality about it in terms of practice. You need to be aware of this now.
Well, you learn to do it. And as you learn to do it, you develop subtlety and you ultimately realize you move very quickly beyond that kind of a superficial intentionality. I mean, basically experiment. So yeah, play with intentionality, play with unintentionality, play with all these various things and stumble on what seems to be effective for you. if anything. I mean, you learn to do it by doing it, because what you're doing when you do it is not something that can be conceptualized or described. I mean, I call it noticing, or I call it, recognizing what this is, or inquiring what experience is, but all these sorts of things. It's like, yeah, but what does that mean? So you kind of have to bridge that gap for yourself and stumble on what that really is, what that looks like in your own experience, and then, learn your way of doing it. If there's any doing.
And if you're really looking, you'll always end up in the same place.
Yeah.
What?
You'll end up in the same place.
Yeah. I mean, basically, if you're even interested in this stuff, you're already in the chute. I mean, it's a done deal. So it will be whatever process it seems to be, and your engagement will look like whatever it seems to look like at different phases, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, to me it seems more and more that it's just obvious in a way, but it's almost like when there's intentionality to try to find it.
Right.
That's just like interpretation going on while it's already there.
Yeah, usually, most often, the personality or the mind will think of itself as a player in the game and try to participate in inquiry. But it's just pretending, because of course it can't actually do that, because it doesn't actually do anything. But that's fine. You don't need to stop it from doing that.
I can't really.
Yeah.
It doesn't never stop trying.
Yeah. Well, the mind doesn't never stop, and so the mind is like, you can think of it as like a monkey that's imitating what you're really doing, even though it's not really doing it, because it's just imitating you. So the mind will pretend to be doing yoga even while you're actually doing yoga, and it's doing it all horribly and wrong, because of course it doesn't have a clue, and never can have a clue, because it's dealing with unfathomability, which is not its milieu.
Yeah, there's some I don't know, sensory some textual feedback, I guess, as yoga, I guess, unfolds.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, actuality or knowing
at the same time, but the words are not relevant to interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, actuality, reality, radiant presence has a nature, and this nature is palpable. And as you come to recognize it, this becomes more and more obvious. And so you kind of home in on this quality of it that is, I mean, for me, it kind of revolves around what I might call presence. Although it goes way beyond this as the simple meaning of that word. But at any rate, it does have, it's not just nothing. It's actually something. It's actually very much something. Something that it is a very peculiar something, but it's a something that has a nature, and it has a quality, and it has, you might say, a meta flavor or something. And as you become more and more aware of this, it becomes easier and easier to recognize and to sort of orient to.
So the flavor is more or less consistent.
The flavor is absolutely consistent. I mean, it's paradoxical, because of course the experiential qualities that are appearing are always all over the place, and are never consistent. They're absolutely inconsistent. And yet the thing, this itself, presence itself, radiant presence, is absolutely consistent. It's invariable. It does not develop. It does not increase or decrease. It doesn't gain or lose. I mean, it's beyond space and time. You know, it always is and always was exactly what it is and was, because is and was just aren't relevant.
There's some correlation between the change in the interpretation as it relates to the unfoldment of yoga.
Sure.
Would you say that's a more efficient way to try to change your interpretations than other ways?
Maybe. For me, I'd say yes. But that's just a matter of strategy, because changing interpretations is really neither here nor there. And that may be a matter of temperament too. Some people may be more stubbornly locked into their interpretations than others. I don't know. Anyway. But again, you can sort of explore that for yourself. But that's kind of a side effect or a spin-off. It's not really the main show, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it seems there's an attraction to that for me here, and that's what was, I don't know, a novice spiritual seeker kind of intentions, where I mean, most of the teachings out there, they, in many extents, talk about what you call navigation.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is fine, but that's not going to liberate you. That's not really real yoga. That's just upgrading. You're trying to upgrade your life. That's magic. And by all means, have at it, you know, upgrade away, or try to. But yoga is much more powerful and fundamental than that, because yoga frees you from it mattering whether or not you upgrade your life. You're still free to do all that. You're still free to do navigating, but you no longer will need to. It'll just become an art form, because you won't feel stuck in it. You won't feel dependent upon your circumstances. The clearer you are, the clearer it becomes what you are, the more obvious it is that you are beyond the circumstances. Your own eternal nature and your own transcendental nature and your own absolutely independent nature just becomes more and more obvious and more, you know, more and more obvious. And so then navigating sort of becomes a hoot, you know. And it's paradoxical, because the personality will continue to be identified with the character, will continue to be playing these games of life and all that. But you'll be sort of sitting there watching it bemused and not really caring a whole hell of a lot.
I was interested, but I never really persisted enough to try lucid dreaming. And I'm thinking now that even when you're lucid, it seems basically your personality from your awake state is taking over in your dream, but you're still stuck in another interpretation. You have more flexibility in terms of what you can manifest in that.
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. Or maybe it's more subtle than that too. Who knows? But at any rate, yeah. I mean, lucid dreaming, in my opinion, is an interesting discovery, and it's a perfect analogy of yoga. But as you say, it may not be exactly the same thing.
It sounds more like what we're talking about is lucid dreaming without the need to change anything in this struggle.
Yeah, but it's slippery and paradoxical, because it doesn't mean the cessation of wanting to try and change things necessarily. But the portion of you that wants to try and change things isn't you. So all of that sort of plays itself out kind of the way the weather does. I mean, You can't really say you can't really say definitively the structure of it.
It's just another sort of fractal.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you know, who you are as a person, you will always be, whether you're liberated or not. But as you become liberated, you won't care who you are. Who you are will not be your problem. It will just be, it'll be an interesting fact.
Yeah.
You say you care more? Is that what you said?
No, I don't think so.
So you won't care.
Oh, you won't care.
Won't
Okay,
care,
that
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I find it's kind of like you have fondness.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
goofiness.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the way I look at my personality is kind of like the way I might look at the antics of a favorite pet.
Yeah.
You know, they're running around doing all these silly things, and sometimes they botch it. I mean, I had a cat that used to love to try and catch birds, and it would wait hiding by the bird feeder, and then a bird would come and it would go sailing through the air, and most of the time it missed the bird, of course, and then it would sort of, you know, if it missed the bird, and it would head up all sort of miffed and looking around to see if anyone saw and go hi, you know, and it probably thought this was a big do, but I would look at it with fondness and think, oh, how cute, you know. I didn't care whether he got the bird or not. It was just that it was being, its nature was sweet. And, you know, I feel sort of that way about my personality. It's like a favorite pet.
Do you usually get the bird?
No, well, don't know. I wouldn't say usually.
Can't you help yourself get birds?
Sure.
Help yourself what?
You can if you can.
Go to Safeway, they've got them frozen. I find lucid dreaming a bit like astral travel.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's pointless. It's a fun feeling to be in circumstances and not be entangled in them.
Yeah.
You know, but then in liberation, there's the absolute unentanglement of any and all circumstances. So it's the same thing, only just by, you know, fundamentally.
I find with myself, and I don't know how anybody else does it, but when I'm involved in lucid dreaming, there's part of me that knows that I'm dreaming, but there's also a part of me that doesn't know who I am.
Right.
And that's kind of like a downer, because I'd rather know who I am than have the fun that's like going on a ride in Disneyland. Basically, meaningless.
Yeah.
I guess these kind of experiences could be potentially useful if they evoke a certain resonance that is part and parcel of yoga. Like if you're not attached so much to your personality because it's just a dream.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, anything is anything resonates with the nature of actuality. Anything whatsoever, anything in experience is revealing. And in whatever way it is, when you see that. Or not lucid dreaming is equally revealing.
Yeah, I guess there's a contrast if you're sort of stuck in your personality.
Yeah, because the whole phenomena of being stuck in your personality is very much to the point of the nature of radiant presence. Because radiant presence is never free of itself, even as it is intrinsically free of itself. I mean, that's why it always looks like all these infinite complexities and convolutions of experiential characteristics. Without it's never actually trapped in them because it's doing them, and yet it unceasingly does them with infinite elaboration and infinite seduction in order to trap itself. So it's, I mean, it's just totally, you know, in its nature, it's just completely and utterly paradoxical, without any dichotomization, without any this or that. So it's very, you know, I mean, like, you know, in the early stages, yoga seems like you're unentangling yourself from interpretation, but that's really kind of naive and sort of, you know, you could look, one day you look back fondly back on those days when you were so foolish. And, you know, it's just, it's not even a matter of entanglement or unentanglement, it's just a matter of what it is. But that, you know, that in itself is neither here nor there. The point is to, you know, definitely be with what you're being with, full on. But it by its very nature will mature. I mean, that's yoga always develops. You can't, if you're doing yoga, you can't not win, basically, because it intrinsically in its own nature unfolds.
Can you not do yoga?
No, you can't. Because life itself is yoga. But when by the time you're doing yoga per se, on a serious level like we deal with, you're liable to be already at the point where you're in grad school.
Or you're fucked.
Yeah, oh, you're really fucked up.
So you keep on doing yoga better and better?
Yeah. And, you know, and after success in yoga, you're still doing yoga. And liberation is kind of an arbitrary threshold. It's something somewhat like perhaps the event horizon of a black hole. But the black hole doesn't stop once you cross the event horizon, it's still up into the black hole. That may be getting a little astrophysical as an analogy.
But approaching that event horizon, for me, I wasn't aware that I was approaching
No.
the event horizon, but I was, in some form, the word's wrong, but I was desperate.
Yeah.
Once you pass the event horizon, desperation.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop, but it goes away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Desperation.
Yeah.
And that's really significant.
No, it's lovely. Well, that's why it's liberating, because
Yeah.
the urgency that seems to pervade being, it seemed to be, there's no basis for it. It's not actually relevant. So it reveals itself as non-existent, as unnecessary, as a fantasy.
Like in the absence of all that Sturm and Drang,
Yeah.
this has just bubbles up with all sorts of interesting
Yeah.
itselfness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Peter, there's this cliche that one hears in yoga classes and meditation groups, that the real yoga, the real practice is what you do outside of the mat or off the mat, right? So one can think one is doing a certain practice, right? Like sit down, do whatever certain practices, and that there's a sort of rarefied setting,
Right.
that is
Or you might say a contrived setting.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so like I do these certain practices, and then like I feel like whatever, there's a lot of energy. There seems to be sensitivity that's building, and so on. But then like what's kind of interesting is like when I'm not doing those particular practices, like I'll be doing something and I'll be like, oh, that's like something is happening, or I notice something similar, or there's like it just it kind of seems to do itself, or there's a way in which whatever is learned or noticed in a verified setting, it sort of shows up elsewhere.
Sure.
Right? So I don't know, not really a question, I think. But it's delightful that it becomes obvious that it's not just like whatever the practice is not limited to itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The important qualities, the actual qualities, are not qualities that come and go. They're not qualities that can be more or less. They're not qualities that can be developed or diminished. So what's always true, and is always the way that it is, without variation, is what is powerful and what matters. Anything that you can, get more of, or by doing something, like an energy or attention or something like that, is not what is powerful. Is just relative navigation, you could say, of different energy presences, but it's not fundamental. It's not inherent. The inherent qualities are invariable. So the important awareness is the awareness that is always 100%. The important energy is the energy that's always 100%, and so on and so forth. So all of this, so anything you do that gains or loses something, by definition, is basically just something. It's an activity. It's like learning to play the piano.
Yeah.
It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's not yoga per se, because it's liable to distract you into wanting to do it better, which is liable to distract you away from the actuality, which you don't need to do better, and which can't be done better, because it's already doing itself with absolute perfection. and that is what is the important and the powerful fact.
Well, what about this quality of aliveness? So like you've talked about a good thing to pay attention to is the life force.
Sure.
Yeah. So like a symptom of doing good yoga or progression in yoga is noticing more aliveness.
No, not more aliveness, just noticing the aliveness. Aliveness never gets more or less. The actual aliveness is always on.
But it's like I feel in the past, like there was more of a numbness to experience.
Right, but that numbness is just a flavor of the actual aliveness. And when that numbness is not there, then that's another flavor of the actual aliveness, which is not a better flavor, just a different flavor. Obviously, there was aliveness, or there would have been no experience of numbness.
So for most people, though, noticing the aliveness you're talking about is easier when you're feeling more alive in the way that.
No, I would not say that. In fact, it's liable to be a distraction. You know, you're liable to misidentify a superficial, you know, sort of, energeticness with the fundamental aliveness. And the same thing applies with awareness and these sorts of things.
Well, maybe not talking about an excited state, I'm talking about a more centered state versus, like when, for me personally, when I was more on the depressive spectrum.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's not even in that state. It seems it's easier when you're in center to kind of fall into yoga in a sense than when you're in the extremities of either overexcitement and then you're chasing whatever that excitement is perceived to be related to, or
but when you're in, I mean, again, it's hard to define exactly what we're talking about, how we're using these words. But when you're in extremes, there's liable to be a motivation orienting to that extreme to either remedy it or get out of it or get to another extreme. Whereas when you're more balanced, you might say, or equilibrated, then there may be less intrinsic superficial motivation to do anything about anything. So then there may be a more easily available or more easily obvious perspective of clarity, you might say.
it seems that's sort of the Eastern philosophy's kind of approach to it. I don't know if it's a precursor or not, but like if you look at Qigong or whatnot, trying to be in bringing your prana to the sattvic kind of qualities rather than tamasic or jasic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know there's a lot of that, and maybe that works, and I'm not saying that it doesn't, but for me, I don't think that even really matters. I really don't. You know, I've had, you know, I mean, a lot of revelations can occur in all sorts of bizarre contexts that are anything but balanced. And again, you know, this kind of balance can be its own seduction. You know, when you find any kind of a equipoise, that can feel like, this is wonderful. And it can be very easy to mistake that wonderfulness with the actual wonderfulness, which is the wonderfulness that is always there, even when you're not in equipoise. So again, it's really, you know, yoga is very mercenary, it's very pragmatic. It only cares about what works. Fuck theory. You know, what works, just bang, get to the punchline. Get to the present, get to this. You know, and at the end of the day, in my opinion, it doesn't matter what route you take. I mean, you can be in any context whatsoever. You can be just really extreme and very very out of equipoise, and you know, and that can be an ideal context for noticing or not. You know, it's just it's just whatever works by hook or by crook. Just find, you know, stumble on what works for you, and then hammer it. You know, and if equipoise doesn't, great, have at it. But there's no end to subtle distractions and subtle misinterpretations, and especially things that are seemingly pleasant and enjoyable, like equipoise, are dangerous seductions. That's why a certain degree of unpleasantness or stress might be a really nice kind of a, you know, destabilized perspective to do yoga with it. Because there's nothing is attractive about it, I guess, but to most people, it depends on your temperament, I guess. If you're sufficiently masochistic, maybe or whatever. but even that, it doesn't matter. It's not about method, or it's not about. There's no superior perspective from which to practice yoga. It just isn't. Unless there is for you, in which case, great. How about it? I mean, I've had some really profound insights at rock concerts. I mean, there's the music blaring, these lights, and it's like, and I maybe I'm stoned or something, and it's it's total sensory overload, anything but equipoise. Or being stone drunk in a bar or something.
Stoned is the operative word.
Well, stone, yeah, maybe, yeah, whatever. I'm trying to remember if I've ever been drunk without also being stoned. Well, certainly not when I was a kid. More recent times, I would say yes. But yeah, it's really a matter of whatever works, and which is challenging, because in modern spirituality, you're completely bombarded with, supposedly advantageous, do this, still the mind, or find equipoise, or bring your energies into balance, or do this or do that, or generate compassion, or, all these things, and it's like, to my opinion, they're all red herrings. They're all just going to be distractions. And none of them are actual advantages necessarily. And then you're liable to end up chasing advantages rather than chasing reality. I mean, how many people have spent 20 years meditating, and they're really, really good at stilling their mind. And they think that's what the point of it is.
I think that's not uncommon.
I think it's not uncommon either. I think it's very common. I think meditators are, as a class, are probably really, really challenged to realize. Not that there's anything wrong with meditation, but it's liable to be a subtle seduction, and a subtle, a prideful orientation of one's personal status or achievement. Oh, I'm a great meditator. I can really nail that shit.
Do you think that if you spend 20 years meditating, you're more likely to discover reality than if you spend 20 years playing marbles?
No, I don't know. I think it's an individual matter. I think anything can happen. I think reality can be discovered at any time by anyone, regardless of what they've been doing or not doing. But I also think that what they've been doing is irrelevant. So focusing on, do this or do that, is beside the point. I mean, for me, it's pretty profoundly true that what you do has no importance whatsoever. What seems to be happening, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is what it is.
Would you say that is your kind of path, but for some people it might be important what they do?
Maybe, I don't know. Again, it's pragmatism, whatever works. You find it where you find it. I mean, it's like saying, how do you find a $20 bill that someone dropped? What should you do if you wanted to find a $20 bill that someone dropped?
There's some pretty obvious things. Look down.
Yeah, look down. But you can be looking down. You can be looking down and walking around the streets for 20 years and not find a $20 bill. Or someone else will get out of the car and look down and there's a $20 bill. You just have to be at the right place at the right time. And it's not about technique. I've developed my looking down skills. So I think I'm going to find that $20 bill really soon.
Well, it's not, it doesn't feel like The $20 analogy does, it kind of breaks down a little bit.
Well, all analogies do,
Yeah,
but it's a pretty funny one.
yeah, it's a good one, but
We got some mileage out of it. Got a few laughs.
because otherwise we wouldn't be here and talk about doing yoga if there wasn't some correlation between investigating something or doing something and realizing what that is. Like, I mean, there aren't any groups on finding $20 bills, for example, right?
I'm not sure about
Yeah,
that.
I think there may be.
You should start one of theirs.
How to maybe how to use those like treasure hunting devices or something.
But I come back to this thing that, and I have no empirical evidence for this whatsoever, it's just a gut feeling, that you're more likely to discover truth if you hang out with gurus than if you hang out in a baseball park.
Well, I would say, yeah, if you hang out with true gurus, yeah. I think, I mean, I'm kind of in that camp, mainly because it was my experience. That if you hang out with realized people, you're liable to stumble on realization, perhaps.
If you hang out in a baseball pitch.
Yeah, and unless there happens to be a realized person sitting next to you. No, I mean, and that's a very old spiritual tradition. Regardless of the practice, I mean, all across the board in every tradition, it's like, find a holy man and go hang out with him.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my path.
I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of like that, regardless of the domain.
Yeah.
When you learn something, you better hang out with somebody who's an expert in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. It's better to, you want to learn to play piano. It's better to hang out with a brilliant pianist than to sit there and read books all day long or do stupid exercises. Get the direct transmission, get the short path.
Yeah, because it's interesting that my limited knowledge of sort of teachings and lineages, they are the more succinct and mystical, perhaps you can say, like the Brahmana or Sarvada or Sarvada's guru would just say, take this thing, forget about the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And then I see that these kind of, even seemingly within their lineages, quite a bit of focus on behavior.
Yeah.
And something resonates for me personally about it, but it's also, it's totally paradoxical. Like, you're it, and at the same time, there's some, addictive behavior you might want to look at.
Sure. In my experience, most real masters that I've been aware of are very forgiving and loose about behavior, even if there may be behavior involved in their system.
Yeah.
You get underlings may be very, very adamant about behavior, but the master is going to be kind of like sitting back and smiling and saying, "Well, don't worry about it too much." I mean, in my experience, that's pretty true. And that's probably the oldest spiritual tradition of all, you're in the tribe, and there's the wild, crazy guy that lives out in his own campfire out back, and some strange people are attracted to go hang out with him for no reason, and they'll hang out at his campfire, and he'll shoot them away or whatever, and they'll bring him little fruits or something, and he'll still let them hang out. And that's, you know, that's how the magic happens. You know, whether it ends up being the shaman or the priest or the, you know, the whatever.
It feels like to me that there needs to be like, not needs to be, but like like we were talking about the other day, how there's 2 stages of yoga apparently, and that in the first stage at least, it is beneficial to put attention on what this is, what experiencing is, and to sort of reflect on it a little bit.
Sure.
Rather than just kind of be like, okay, whatever. I mean, now, knowing how to put that attention, you can take that to a concert or
right.
take that ability to wherever.
Yeah. Right.
But if you're not investigating or putting attention on what's really going on here,
yeah,
then realization can probably just be a matter of karmic fluke.
Yeah.
But if I was a betting person, you know, I would really put my money on somebody who isn't interested in these kind of things at all.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I mean, intelligent engagement is the master technique, regardless of specifics. Because intelligence is flexible, it's adaptive, it's intuitive, it's you know, it explores, it is scientific. It tries and it finds, you know, it finds its way by trial and error, by observation, by investigation, so on and so forth. Why don't we take a 10-minute break?
How is this DVD?
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I'm alone to you.
Lots of, all right,
Yeah, please do. Take it.
thank you.
I haven't watched it in a while. We're going to watch it sometime, but take it and bring it back sometime.
Well, we're just going on vacation. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, right. That's right. You're about to go.
Havana.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you flying directly or?
No, we're going on a cruise.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't know if it's nice or not.
It'll be,
Havana is beautiful.
the cruise is a wonderful experience. They're horrible and grotesque, but it's wonderful to see how horrible and grotesque they are. My experience.
I've got a feeling this might be the first and last.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've yet to go on a cruise because of that. I just hear that it's like, don't.
This is a 5-day cruise, so it's easy.
But it's convenient because,
They have cruise ships.
Yeah.
Where do you get them?
It was fun. Don't tell them it's a cruise.
Fort
Just don't
Lauderdale.
tell them.
I don't tell them it's a cruise. I heard the Alaskan cruises are a little more,
I did an Alaskan cruise. It was lovely.
yeah, that I would do.
The one trick about cruises is to get on a smaller boat.
Not those gigantic.
I mean, yeah, these days, most of them are, the smaller still means ridiculously huge.
Oh, yeah?
But get on a smaller boat. The bigger boats are just horrible. They're like,
How about this?
it's like taking a cruise in Times Square, you know, it's absurd.
And everywhere you go, you're like stuck. Yeah,
Oh.
you're pretty much stuck.
How about it's like 12 stories high? And
Yeah, that's the big one. That's the big
You
one. You're getting the full-on experience.
Well, as I say, it's 5 days, so it's not.
And you
Yeah,
can watch
no,
that.
it's really fun. Well, mainly you'll have Cuba, the Ports of Call.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just
And Key West.
Yeah.
Key West.
I mean, usually what they do is they sail at night and then you're in your port during the day.
Well, it's a whole day from Havana back to Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah,
A day and a night, I think.
right. You have a day experience.
So we got a day to Key West and a day at Key West. And then, I mean, none of these trips are more than 30 miles. I think.
Yeah, no, they're very short.
Is that your only stop in Cuba? Is that not?
And Key West.
Key West is not Cuba.
No,
You'll be in Havana for a couple of days?
we're going to be in Havana for 2 days,
Nice.
Key West in 1 day. and
Nice,
then we're home.
nice. That's fabulous. Yeah. I don't need to tell you.
I just want to go to Cuba. But we discovered actually that what we should have done is just got an airplane to Cuba.
Go to Cuba.
And missed out on the cruise.
The joy of the cruise. Well, it'll be fun. It'll be
We're
amusing.
going with friends. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why
Well, that'll be nice.
that's why we got on this thing.
Sit around and drink.
That's a
Do
good.
that.
They don't have to drive anything on.
Yeah.
Be very aware of it.
Really?
My son and I took the Alaska Marine Highway. It's a ferry that goes from, I think, Seattle and goes all the way up the Inside Passage.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was great. It was beautiful. It goes all the way
Yeah,
up.
it's very pretty out there.
We went up to Juneau
Yeah.
and then got off. That was pretty interesting. We were just, we were actually camping, so we had, along with some other people, we had our tents lashed to the railing of the tent of the back of the boat. It was this big open space in the back of the ferry.
Is that like a several day thing then? Like from
Yeah,
Seattle
it
all
took
around?
probably, I think, 2 nights.
So what's the difference between a ferry and a cruise?
Probably the size of the
No
boat.
swimming pool for one thing.
Well, I'm going to try to avoid swimming pools and nightclubs and gymnasiums. And
Yeah.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
With 2,000 other people.
You'll like the buffets.
The face is gonna be.
They'll have buffets that'll have like 60 or 70 selections.
Wow.
And a lot of them will be quite good.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah, fast now. Plan to eat a lot on your trip.
I'm very fearful. Actually, what I'm looking forward to is eating in Havana.
Yeah, so for sure. That's the biggie. Oh man.
We gotta get some.
Human food is a really dear place in my heart. It's so good. Oh my
It's
God.
not particularly spicy according to Ruby.
It's not hot spicy. It's rich, delicate spicy. They don't use cayenne. They don't use chili peppers. I mean, some people sprinkle a little hot sauce on, but that's not part of the tradition. But it's very sort of rich, very flavorful. You know, raw
Like
spice.
mole or something like that.
Well, it's not Mexican at all.
No, but I'm just saying,
It-
like
yeah.
in terms of a rich sauce or something.
Yeah, I would say that's rich like that. It's actually more like European cooking than anything. They use a lot of wines, wine, garlic, and different spicings and all that.
Cool.
But it's really really good.
Do you remember a dish?
Oh, there's so many.
Seafood, fair amount of seafood? Okay.
Yeah, you have a lot of seafood, lots of pork dishes. I mean, my favorite is this for Cuban food is mainly the pork dishes. I'd say for me. I mean, the seafood dishes are good, but they're more just like a seafood dish. Whereas the more distinctively Cuban type dishes are, they have one that's lovely. It's called tamale and cazuela, which is it's basically a corn porridge with pork and onions and various things cooked into it. So it's sort of a thick porridge. You eat it with a spoon, and oh my God, a lot of garlic. I mean, it's just
Sounds great.
it's very savory.
Well, did you go to Cuba yourself?
I've never been to Cuba, but I grew up in Miami, and Miami has probably the best Cuban food outside of Havana.
Yeah, for sure. And a ton of Cubans there too.
Oh yeah, I mean, and very, very, very Cubans. There's lots and lots of variety, so I mean, I'm very familiar with that.
How's it compared to the Cuban restaurant that's popular is down in South?
Well, it's
That's Puerto Rican.
just Puerto Rican, which is very similar to Cuban, but this is
Cubano sandwiches.
yeah, they have Cuban sandwiches is a particular recipe of sandwich.
Is it more American though, not so much authentic Cuban?
This, yeah.
But you did those.
Well, I don't know if I say more American, but it's a little less. It's less. It's not as subtle.
Yeah.
Good Cuban food. Yeah, good Cuban food is so subtle.
Yeah.
Cuban food's very good, but it's not the same.
A little different.
Yeah. Genlon, At what, Gmail?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It was only,
I was gonna eat more pie, but.
well, you don't put that at Gmail right now.
Better take it.
And I'm like
Take some home.
digesting.
Yeah, John
Just a
said,
little.
I think I put
Just
Gmail
take some home. I'll put some in your container.
yeah. like-
Breakfast.
You ran into your kids the other day.
Oh, yeah?
Like being a lawyer.
Oh, that's right. They were down here a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
Monday, I think.
Both of them?
yeah, no kid, no.
Yeah, they were having. It was a girls' day out.
Girls there.
I guess it depends on what field you're in, right?
You have two daughters?
They're twins.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Oh.
I think I've heard that before. Wow, that's cool. Identical?
Yeah.
That's great.
It is totally fun. They're fabulous. They're super people.
That's great.
It turned out to be not quite so identical after all.
No, well, they're not. They're very different people.
They're different
And
people.
they're very different style, but if you happen to catch them dressed the same, with their hair the same, distracted with the same expression. You see how similar they are.
I didn't like
They carry themselves totally differently, and then, their demeanor and expression is totally different.
Yeah, I don't know, but someone has to work.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Did they recognize you?
They recognized us, they didn't know what our names were.
Oh, yeah. They wouldn't know you.
They were in the mall, it was,
Yeah.
they were just distracted to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I think I was so it was a shopping trip. Real estate out. Shopping and gossip, I suppose. Whatever women do when they're having their days out.
I've never been to a girls' night out.
No, we're kind of disqualified somehow.
Yeah.
But one of those mysteries we can never truly know in its fullness.
Right.
On the other hand, they can never really know boys' night out. So.
They're probably quite thankful for that.
Yeah, probably.
Did you talk to them about any of this stuff growing up?
Not directly, subliminally. I mean, I was at some pains to try to teach them a strong sense of irreverence and critical thinking and non-linearity.
I think you did that very well.
I feel happy about it. Yeah, they've got good heads on their shoulders.
What do you mean by irreverence?
It's,
I mean, I know what you mean, but
To
an example for it.
what do I mean by irreverence? What do I mean by irreverence? I have no idea. I mean, I know what I mean by irreverence, but I don't
Fuck you
know.
to the man kind of thing?
No, nothing so coarse. More like
The
a,
established, like
more like a,
anti-establishment.
more like a knowing chuckle.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, like an anti-establishment kind of.
Yeah, so that's how, so you really think things are that way, don't you?
Yeah, like
For you.
iconoclastic.
Yeah.
So they never went through a Christian fundamentalist phase.
Not yet.
Not yet.
There. How about non-linearity? How do you teach something like that?
I just look around.
Just showing that non-logical non sequiturs, to be able to jump from some bit of information to some totally different information without having a cause and effect or a logical connection. And yet do it in a context of relevance or meaningfulness rather than changing the subject.
Like even with their schooling and like where they grew up and their conditioned environment.
Yeah, I mean, all that, basically, trying to antidote all of that as much as possible. Voice of the opposite, of the loyal opposition,
Yeah.
or the not so loyal opposition.
So by non-linearity, you kind of mean like how everything is just spontaneous in the moment rather than like the seeming cause and effect kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, pointing out the way in which people being, needing to make sense and all that's kind of a big joke. Anyway, we seem to be reconvened, so I'll declare us reconvened by the power vested in me.
You got any other speech?
Another speech?
I assume it was in the beginning of this.
No.
No, I don't
You missed
usually,
the missing.
I don't typically do speeches on these particular evenings. You all don't need the 5-cent tour.
Peter, here, I find myself still experiencing this fluctuation of, I see yoga's happening, it's happening with me not doing anything, to being fully identified, reactive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but a lot of irritation's coming up around that. And I'm trying to like, okay, well, see it, like experience it with the eyes of yoga and like just question even like, what is this irritation? Like really, what is it? It's just reality happening, right? Something about that, it's like not cutting it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's just more frustration, more
Right.
irritation. And,
Yeah.
and I don't know why it bothers me so much.
It's a stage. No worries. It's all good. The irritation itself is, you're still oriented to it as there's two things and you want to get from the bad to the good.
Yeah, that irritates me because I know
right.
better.
Yeah, right. But the fact that you're irritated is still part of is still in the game of the two. But it's not important. It's not particularly important because all of that, just the presence of that in your experience will, by its very presence, be a process of development beyond it.
It's the investment in it that is the most irritating.
Yeah.
I don't really,
I understand.
when irritation comes, I know for sure it's not about the circumstances or like anything at all. It's just like, why am I so invested?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's a good comment. Why am I invested? Why am I so invested? That itself is good yoga, because as your yoga progresses, you'll discover more and more that it's not about not being invested. It's about seeing. But like I say, no worries, because it's going to take care of itself. You're doing great. It's just there's certain phases that have these annoying flavors of irritation and all the kinds of things you're talking about. But it's all temporary.
It's random. It's not like there's no cause and effect. So it's just sometimes some days it's like that, and other times it's just super calm waters and just clear seeing.
Yeah.
You notice the irritation when it's happening or after?
During. Yeah, and I don't know why it's irritating and frustrating to even think about yoga when it's happening. Like I can't even bring yoga into it. There's no space almost, like, because there's no answer to like what it is. That's a weird, irritating part.
Right.
And there's a part of me that wants to know, and I see that.
Yeah.
It's the habit of wanting to solve it, to do something about it, to know why it's happening.
To get rid of it?
No.
Just to.
Yeah, it's almost.
So what does knowing what's happening, what would that do?
Right? I really sit with those words. Yeah, then it's very obvious that it's a preferential thing of not wanting to go through it. Of like,
the irritation.
Yeah, and the frustration. Something wants to know why, so it could not have it happen again.
Yeah, but the coexistence of those conditions is all that matters. The presence of those conditions is the process by which, you'll learn to be with them more subtly. Yeah, because again, we're conditioned. Our pre-yoga stance is all about dichotomies, this versus that, and this is better than that. I'm trying to get from that to this, and so on and so forth. And yoga is all about mixing pot, learning that nothing is actually the opposite of anything else. Nothing is better or worse than anything else. But you come to that mixing by having these things juxtaposed. And in that juxtaposition, it can be just uncomfortable or annoying or what have you. But that juxtaposition itself is the very melting pot, is the very sort of.
The juxtaposition meaning.
Of identifying and then not wanting to identify or whatever. All of that.
Is that like just being with
The-
love?
Yeah, having these contradictory, orientations.
It's frustrating.
It's frustrating.
That's the irritation.
But
I
yeah,
see myself experiencing the.
yeah. But the presence of that irritation is the very process. Irritation is not a problem that the process will take you beyond. The irritation is the very process that goes beyond.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
The irritation is not something you need to get beyond. The irritation is the very process that moves beyond.
And in a way, it's almost like seeing that as just reality.
Yes, exactly. Actuality is pure paradox. And paradox, when you approach it naively, looks like contradiction. And contradiction, it can be annoying or disorienting or whatever. So learning to be with contradiction and see that it's not contradictory nature is the very essence of yoga.
Yeah, that's when I get moments of that. And that's when I almost experientially can feel loosening and okay.
Yeah.
And then there's a tactic I'm noticing where sometimes I just let it run me and just be fully with it. And that sometimes helps do that. It's just, okay, it's out. Then it'll come back.
No, that's great. You're being with it very sophisticatedly. You're doing great. No worries.
I'm just not giving myself back.
Yeah. I mean, that's the master key for sure. Always remember the most holy mantra.
Fuck it.
Like sit around. Be irritated.
Yeah, slowly be irritated.
Doing my irritation practice. Well, if you're sensitive, any practice is an irritation practice.
When people would come to my old master and say, I want a mantra, you always say Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. It's always the same one.
That's great. Who was this? Kosha?
Yeah.
For the going back to non-linearity, the mind is like very linear. So how do you even, and the appearance that everything is cause and effect and
Right.
related,
Right.
is so strong.
Right.
How do you even sort of yourself see through that, let alone sort of raise a child and help them see it?
Well, the how yourself sees through it is ultimately gets down to yoga. And to help a child see it, it means play with puns and things like that that don't make logical sense, but that have, where there's intelligent interconnectedness, but not logical or rational or causal interconnectedness. Puns are a great example. For, among many, many others. Or non sequiturs is another great example.
Can you give an example of a non sequitur?
I don't know.
And on what?
A non sequitur. That means something that doesn't follow. So like if we're talking about yoga and all of a sudden I say teacup, that's a non sequitur. Or you might think it's a non sequitur. Unless you're skilled yogi, in which case you know.
Speeches.
Speeches. That's good. Doesn't make any sense. I should have
I remember my
Space Force.
my sister had a, I don't know what these games are called, but they're totally mind benders, and like you have to get one part out of the other, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, right. Puzzles.
And she had a bunch of those, and it was like a kit.
Yeah, they're
My
fun.
nephew, so she has 4 kids, and the youngest is quite far out from the rest. And he was like just a kid, and he would solve it like that, and we were like, we would be just like stuck hours with it. They were just, kids are just more flexible. They don't have that strong conditioning. Seen, and then he was also a super smart kid anyway. But
Yeah, evidently. Silliness is another very good way to teach non-linearity. Because silliness on the face of it is ridiculous, but there's more there. There's a funness to it and a meaningfulness to it that has nothing to do with what's going on the face of it.
I think magic tricks are also good ones.
Yeah.
You don't know what it is that's going on.
Yeah.
You can tell that it's going on.
You may recall last Wednesday, I told you how Marsha came up with the phrase, know the flow of the glow, to sum up yoga. She came up with another one today, which is, simmer in the shimmer of the glimmer. Isn't that good?
I might let that one alone.
Yeah, but they're cute. They're cute, but they're actually quite profound, both of them.
That's non-linear for you.
Well, I mean, one way to look at yoga is learning to discover and appreciate the actuality of non-linearity, the actuality of paradox, the actuality of infinity, and so on and so forth. All different ways of saying the same thing.
Paradox is so interesting because it's so obvious, and yet like it's not obvious till you really sort of start to observe and sit with it.
Yeah.
Mind is just all about black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you question your conclusion, you can see there's no inherent sort of position you can take on anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actuality, radiant presence, is purely and entirely paradoxical. There's no one way that it is, contrasted with some other way. You know, in the beginning of spirituality, we're approaching it. We think there's these problems, and we think there's these solutions, and we want to get from the problems to the solutions, and learn the process to do it. But the process of yoga is learning that none of that actually exists. The problems and the solutions are one intrinsically in the paradox of actuality, and the processes also are that in that, as well as not that is also that. So all the problems are solved by being eliminated as problems. They're just revealed as aspects of this, your paradox. So you're absolutely beyond individuality while being absolutely and completely identified with and embodied within personality. You know, paradox makes no sense whatsoever, and yet is, you know, it's like that.
Like you are a body and not a body at the same.
Yeah, you're a body and you're not a body. Try and make sense of that.
It's interesting how like a lot of the teachers consider just starting out and getting you to appreciate that, sort of focus on you're not the body. And so then like the ego gets all riled up and it's like, oh, I'm not a body, I'm the eternal consciousness or whatever. When really a lot of spirituality, I feel like is appreciating the nature of paradox.
Well, the true spirituality is appreciating the nature of paradox, for sure. Any spirituality that says, you know, not this, but this, is not true spirituality. It's just upgrading your identification games. Hopefully upgrading.
And it seems that this paradox also seems kind of synonymous with surrender, because you can't understand a paradox, so you sort of just have to throw your hands up in the air and
well,
like, I don't know.
Yeah, sure, but it's ultimately much deeper than that. You know, as you become really, really familiar with paradox, you learn there's nothing to surrender to, and there's certainly no need to throw your hands up in the air, because the paradox is actually it's not just an irresolvable, nonsensical condition. It's the very essence of what is powerful, what is meaningful, what is profound.
All
It's a very,
paradox, all paradox comes from holding some frame of reference, some way.
right. Paradox as paradox.
And then if you're with the paradox in a way that isn't a problem anymore, you maybe without even knowing how you've done it or that you've done it, you move that frame of reference no longer is holding you or your sense of things. And that is a way of, it's kind of a way of being in a way that's it's kind of like a dance move or something that applies a lot to a lot. I don't know. But anyway, it's not it just should. The paradox can kind of give you a way to discover that can continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure I've quite seen how, like you were saying, that the paradox is the vital force, or like the power beneath all things. Said something along those lines, right?
Yeah, because what the paradox is vital force, is the actuality, is that which is doing all this. See, paradox exists because there seem to be all sorts of conditions that seem to be irreconcilably contrary to other conditions. There's all sorts of thises and that's, and the thises aren't the that's, and the that's aren't the thises and that's. And yet, in actuality, they are. In actuality, all of those non-reconcilable differences are reconciled and are not differences, while not being negated as being what they are in their particularity, in their particularity that looks as if it's irreconcilable and looks as if it's differences.
Feels like that I'd have to sit with it a little bit more and sort of see a little bit deeper into it to intuit that.
Yeah, well, you're doing it. I mean, no worries. It comes on its own. I mean, that's just the very nature of yoga. Paradox isn't a separate issue. Paradox is just another way to look at what happens in yoga. There is one thing which includes and is everything. And the everything which it is and includes seems to be all sorts of infinite differentiation and all that are all different from each other. So that's right, there's the paradox right there. That is the paradox. But since all this difference is the one thing, it's not an actual difference, and that's the resolution of the paradox. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that it is, of course, being the only thing, is life itself, force itself, reality itself, the being of the universe, all of these. Mm-hmm. So because we've been so brainwashed in mind and in analytical and conceptual ways of thinking, we're experts at dwelling on differences. This is different than that. But we're not experts typically at dwelling on the sameness of everything. And so that's yoga is, in a way, a remedial of getting to the other side of that, of discovering discovering the sameness, discovering the one that is all this, without negating the all this. It's not all this is somehow erased and canceled down to one. It already is one, while still being all this. And that is the fundamental paradox, and that's what you discover to see clearly and be comfortable with. I mean, it's beyond merely being comfortable with it. You are it, it's you live it, you integrate with it absolutely. You are integrated with it absolutely. You come to see that integration.
See, that's what you mean by there's nothing to surrender to.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing.
Yeah.
This will radically change when you have a baby.
Yeah.
That's when your yoga really kicks into high gear.
Yes, really kicks into high gear.
That's why I don't think we should worry about how are you going to guide the child. I think the child's going to guide us.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Practicing yoga.
Totally. The child is your guru. Totally.
It's actually easy. Don't worry about it.
Just what was Marsha's first saying? Go with the flow.
Know the flow of the glow. Shimmer with the shimmer of the glimmer.
It feels like it should be easy to take it very serious.
That's what parents get to get all worked out.
Oh, you'll run the full gamut, no worries.
Yeah.
That's all part of it.
Totally, it's the path. No, it's all good.
Still all one.
Totally. It's real yoga. Parenting is real yoga.
That's easy.
But you have to go through a few of them. You have to have a few kids.
Easy for you to say.
Well, I saw it from the other side. It's parents did it like a lot cooler, it seems, about it. Well, I wasn't there for my sister, but I was like, oh, there's a kid there? What was he doing?
Yeah, there's some funny memes on the internet. Good one. First kid had.
Very different.
It's just relax.
Oh, I know.
Relax after
Because
the second one?
you've been through it all.
After the
You
first
can
one.
relax with the first one, that's the real point, but yeah, that's the fun.
But to see the differences of how we approach
Yeah.
first time.
Sure.
Second time.
Well, the first time you don't know the ropes, so you're learning it. The second time you've been there, done that. So it's like falling off a log. It's like, oh yeah, you change it.
I feel like two. I've always been in the 0 or 2 camp. Because I was just the one, and I feel like I got cheated out of a life experience.
Well, there's many different ways to see that. So
Yeah, for sure.
I recommend flexibility.
Yeah.
Stop at 5, whatever happens.
Yeah. I don't think it's possible to do 5 anymore in today's world.
Move to a different state.
To be out on the prairie with helping hands on the farm.
Peter, you were a middle child? You're like
Yes.
third out of 4?
The second out of 3.
You're the more rebellious one.
In a way. My little brother was profoundly rebellious in a way. But I was more rebellious in a way. Anyway.
Are you the only one that was kind of like interested in these subjects, or was your family
Me.
following some kind of teacher or guru?
Only one.
Wow.
My family were secular humanists, I suppose you would say, or atheists.
I mean, that's how you are in your family. That's how I am in my family. It seems like we're the only ones into this kind of thing, and then they're more conformed to like majority of the way the world is.
What's this notion about needing to give up all your opinions and ideas and beliefs to really see reality the way it is?
It's the other way around. You don't need to give up anything, but once you see reality, then you will give up all your opinions and beliefs.
I like that, because like
Trying to give up all your opinions and beliefs is just play acting. You're pretending to see reality. Whereas when you see reality, then all your opinions and beliefs are out the window. It's like, oh my God, how could I have ever thought that?
Right, because like when some her teachers talk about this, and I'm like, do you know how many fucking opinions and beliefs I'd have to like write down and then pretend to give them up? Like, how do you even make it?
But a lot of spiritual instruction is like that. It's asked backwards because you're being advised to try to behave in a way or simulate what you would be like if you were realized. But you don't need to do that. All you need to do is get realized, and then all of the side effects come with it, taken care of without needing to simulate anything.
But there were some Christian mystics who stayed very Christian.
Sure,
Thomas More.
sure.
Totally powerful dogma. Profound.
Was he? I've read some stuff by him that didn't seem so dogmatic and seemed pretty Republican.
He wasn't dogmatic, but he believed. it all seems dogma to me. I was never a Christian. So.
No, you're a dyed-in-the-wool communist.
Dogma there too.
Well, no doubt about it. But it doesn't include the G word or anything remotely like it.
Peter, the Samurai in the Shimmer of the Glamour, something like that, or the Glimmer of the Shimmer. That's it seems easy enough to feel that when I'm around you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's like a lot easier than when I'm by myself. I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's like I've just been noticing that the last whatever hour, like there's like I don't necessarily even have to look at you or you be speaking. I can still sort of feel it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't know. So I wanted to comment on it. I find it curious.
Well, in practical terms, if you have this kind of a feeling that feels, at all valuable or profound, as you become familiar with it, it'll be easier and easier for you to find on your own. So, being aware of that, being exposed to that in itself can be a key to being more self-reliant with it, because you have a taste of what to look for, you might say.
I also kind of like it in small doses.
Huh.
I don't know if I want to bask in this all the time.
Ultimately, you will. Ultimately, you love basking in it all the time.
It's kind of it's a little bit exhausting.
But it's not exhausting as it is. It's only exhausting by contrast with your normalcy, because of the conflict.
Paradox.
Yeah.
Like it's exhausting to try to hold up my normalcy. Well.
Yeah, or your normalcy may subliminally be trying to get a handle on what you're feeling, so it's working overtime. Something like that. Trying to make sense of it, or whatever, whatever.
I've become a big fan over the years of, I don't know what you call it exactly, kind of like unconsciousness.
Yeah.
That whole realm of you really don't know what's going on. You can't tell something's going on. It's kind of like being out in the dark and there's.
Yeah. Yeah, unresolvability. I mean, in a profound sense, actuality, realization is pure confusion. But see, confusion is only confusing when you think it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
When you get that that doesn't make sense and never will make sense, then confusion is a joyful release. But in the presence of the paradoxical presence of actuality is pure confusion. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Then to get the okayness of that, to really like go into that is just an incredible release and relief, because all of this trying to make sense of things it demands a lot of effort. It really does. And so in the transitional process, it can be doubly so, because not only you're trying to, make sense of things, you're also trying to be with something that makes no sense, and so you're trying to make sense of that. The kind of thing you're talking about, where it's tiring. But as you become more and more settled in the absolute nonsensical, irrational nature of this, the fact that this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever and never will. It's pure confusion. It's easy. Confusion doesn't need to be done. You don't need to do confusion. It's a given. Like, it's effortless. It's like, okay, nothing makes any sense. I don't have a clue. What could be easier? I mean, what a load off.
One doesn't suffer it. Confusion isn't done to one because there isn't a one.
Well, it's simpler than that. Confusion is, and it's lack of confusion. It's any kind of making sense that is the suffering. Because it's this enormous strain to try to, keep saying 2 + 2 makes 4 when it doesn't. I mean, living in a world that makes sense is an enormous effort. This is one of the reasons why realization is such a relief and such bliss. It's like, oh my God, I'm free of all that thing. I mean, you're busting your ass, working all the time, trying to keep it together, trying to trying to have some. And then it's like, nothing makes any sense whatsoever, and it doesn't matter. How nice.
Things seem to come together in some kind of way of their own.
It totally, well, it does. Then there is no together. It doesn't even come together. It's just, I don't know, just this.
There's a confusion about the word confusion.
There's confusion about the word confusion, yes.
The confusion that you're talking about doesn't feel like you're stuck in a framework.
Yeah, because you feel like the confusion is not supposed to be there. You feel like you're supposed to make sense of it. So in that context, the confusion is a failure. But see, that's the fallacy. The confusion is not supposed to make sense and can never make sense. In fact, nothing whatsoever makes any sense. And that's perfectly clear and obvious and self-evident and self-verifying.
Yet we've never stopped trying.
Yeah, so the problem isn't the confusion. The problem is trying to make sense.
Never stop trying to catch that bird.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre because in the spiritual path, you think, I'm confused and I want clarity, so I'm going into spirituality. But then the path of spirituality is pure confusion. It's like, what am I doing? How do I do it? I don't know. And then the goal of spirituality is pure confusion again, but it solves the original problem because you realize that the confusion wasn't the problem. It was the wanting clarity that was the problem. That's the truth. That's profoundly true.
That is.
Write that down.
Why does, like, when, what's that sense of relief you feel when you can, like, mentally make sense of things?
It's stopping to trying to force.
That's just the power, the joy of the power of intelligence.
Yeah.
But you said that it's a lot of work to hold that together, and yet.
Well, the holding it together is a lot of work. The joy of intelligence, making sense of things, not a lot of work. That's just flashes of inspiration.
Yeah, I think if you look at it closely, it really is. It just appears within you, And,
yeah.
And it's delightful that happens.
Yeah.
But that's happening all the time.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example. These conversations, I have no idea what I'm saying or how I'm saying it, and it's all bullshit. But I can say it really artfully and interestingly and articulately to the extent that it seems to be very profound, and it is very profound. But it doesn't stand up. It doesn't hold water.
Still bullshit.
It's still bullshit. It's pure confusion. It's pure chaos. So this is exactly an example of what we're talking about. It's the exercise of the artfulness of intelligence in a context of free-form, nothing in particular or anything in particular.
that makes it look, I mean, as a pointer, that's really like, okay, so how do you get the confusion?
You don't really get the confusion.
Yeah.
Why are you trying to pretend you're not in confusion? That's the
Ooh, I like
work.
that. Okay. Yeah, that's a better way to approach it.
I mean, be honest, do you really have a clue? Have you ever had a clue? You're just really good at pretending that you don't. You know, you learn to play the game.
And that's why we're so exhausted.
Yeah, it's exhausting being coherent. It's exhausting being someone and having a coherent story. It's like, how you doing? What have you been up to? Well, I this and that and the other and this and that. Really? How are you doing? I don't know. What have you been up to, John? I have no idea. I can't remember.
It's so true. Like, I mean, I find it really exhausting to sort of become detailed in conversation.
Of course it's exhausting.
I've noticed that it stopped mattering to me. Like, there's a period that I was really annoyed by the fact that I had to, like, people would ask me, so how are you or whatever, and I'd have to make up this linear bullshit.
Yeah.
And it would kind of annoy me, and then I just stopped and stopped getting annoyed with that. And like you said, I'm really amazed by the creativity of bullshit that comes out.
Yeah. No, it's remarkable. Yeah, when you get out of the way, the intelligence can really wing it and fly.
Especially in the context of work, I'm like, shit,
yeah,
that sounded good. I need to write that down.
Yeah, I mean that's what separates, you know, the Steve Jobses and people like that from the schmoes. It's just a total uninhibited, joyful bullshitter, rather than someone that plods along and tries to worry about, you know, being coherent.
It also needs to have somebody not paying too much attention. I mean, you look at Trump, he bullshits all the time, but everybody's listening to his every word.
But he's
not artful.
He's not artful. He's not an intelligent bullshitter.
But even if he was an intelligent bullshitter, they would catch him on it. When I bullshit, there's nobody fact checking me.
Yeah.
Very few people. Not that
one.
No, I have a few people who fact check me every now and but generally I get away with it. And the same thing, you know, I still ask people, how are you doing? And I really don't want an answer to that.
No, how are you doing? It's a dance. It's an invitation to a dance.
That's right.
You know, it's like chatting, it's like, how you doing, man?
The shopping trip to Safeway and their grandmother and
yeah.
Jesus, it can go on for.
Yeah, but they're bad dancers. They're boring dancers.
The other part of the confusion seems that when you're trying to enforce or hold things together, and there's confusion, it seems the feel is more of an irritation, because you're trying to hold the belief that something should converge.
Right. Sure.
And it's not, and so it's irritating.
Yeah.
That's kind of the felt experience.
Yeah, you're always
to avoid that to get to clarity, but there's no irritation.
Yeah.
But the confusion that you're talking about, there's no irritation at all.
No.
From a felt standpoint.
No, it's not irritation because it doesn't. It
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. There's no. It's just there's no convergence or divergence. It just is. There's no process. It's not this confusion and so or and then or it's just this confusion period. You know, so you know, the present moment alone exists and it's exactly the way it is, and exactly the way it is absolutely inconceivable and yet completely explicit. Makes absolutely no sense. And bang, done deal. And that's all. That's all there is. And so all of this trying to make sense of things by dragging time and structure and this and then that and all this stuff into it, you know, it just involves these enormous constructions in imagination and fantasy. There is no future, there is no past, there is no structure. There's just this instantaneous flash. It's just exactly this, exactly like this, exactly the way it is. And, you know, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? I mean, what would that even mean? It just is. It's, you know, explicitly exactly what it is. And there's nothing more than that. And all this trying to make sense is trying to make more of it than that, trying to add on to it, trying to extend it in time and space and in structure. It has no structure, it's just.
Well, it's an interesting conversation when it feels like paradox is something that's easier to grasp than confusion. It's like, okay, we've covered paradoxes, and that seems to be, as a concept, a little bit easier to sort of digest than, I mean, confusion is like just, well, I mean, you're right, like, at some level it's all confusion, but it can't be sort of dropped by the mind.
No, my head can't make any sense of it at all. But mind is dependent upon process, whereas the instantaneous fact, it just is what it is. There's no process in the fact, it just bang, poof, magical apparition in this instant, you know, flash, here it is.
I think the whole sort of mechanism of mind is cause and effect, is that whole sense of structure and whatnot. And,
it tries to extend the naked fact into some kind of explained context.
Yeah.
But there is no context other than the naked fact. The naked fact is the only context.
Well, context can be imagined, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. That's what it does.
Wandering around with this imagination thing.
Yeah, these castles in the sky that don't exist.
Speaking of paradoxes, just sort of the day-to-day life seems so, the culture is enforcing this linearity and memory-based interpretation, and oh, this is in context, this is where we were, this is where we are, this is where we're going. And yeah.
Peter, how does it work? Is it after a while when it gives up the habit of trying to make sense of things, or but trying to make sense it still happens, but that recedes in the background?
Well, one discovers that the great revelation is the discovery that nothing does make sense. And then once that happens, the other two happen, the other two occur concurrently. Once you know for a fact, self-verifying that nothing does make sense, then obviously the urge to do so diminishes and also recedes to the background, even as the mind will continuously try to do that, because that's the nature of its mechanism.
And then the art is a sort of it's a sort of making sense of things that don't make sense, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's magic. Once nothing makes sense, then you can use that as a basis to make sense of anything. It's like once you see that the block of marble doesn't have any particular sculpture in it, you can make any sculpture you want out of it. Because you discover it's a perfect Rorschach plot. You can hallucinate anything onto it, so then you're free to get creative.
But that's like other like cities or psychic powers, right? Like
Sure.
I met this one woman today. She's a professional artist. She's got a studio over at the Marin Contemporary Art Museum, and she does this strange art where she was telling us a story about where she could draw and everything decently well in high school, but she didn't think that she had any creativity or could be a professional, and then she went on and did her business career, and then everything fell apart, and then she thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll try some painting, and she could just like paint a pretty accurate representational picture, but it was like so soon after she started doing what she called the soul paintings, which was like
Soul paintings?
Yeah, she would, or spirit paintings, whatever, where instead of just doing the exact representation, she would she'd, like go into meditation and then so anyway, she was wanting to tell us all about how there are all these like she would give the finished piece to whatever her clients, and they would say, oh my God, you could see all this and that, and oh, this is the meaning of all this and that. So she was kind of like, isn't there kind of like making sense of something there, or at least like it doesn't seem to make any sense that she could know whatever this and that about the clients or whatever.
Sure.
But still, like she's
Sure. That's just like any kind of doing readings or doing tarot readings or astrology or anything. You know, you're extracting valuable information essentially out of nothing without process. Or there may be process present, but you're not relying on the process. It's the extraction itself that makes it powerful.
And so that only really happens if at some level one has a realization or a recognition that nothing makes sense.
Well, on a functional level, you may not realize that you realize it, but you have to realize it functionally enough, at least within the context of the function you're doing. So at least within the context of her painting, she realizes that.
Yeah.
Whether she herself realizes that she realizes it as a, you know, on any other level is who knows, that's her business.
Yeah. So like when I was trying to do that tarot reading today for that friend of mine, like there is like there is a still trying to make sense of
Right.
things.
Exactly. When it gets powerful is when you stop trying to make sense.
Yeah. But don't you need like a foundation of sense? Like I look at your...
You don't need it, but you can use it.
How does that work?
Huh?
How does that work?
Magic, yeah. Basically, it works by inspiration.
Is it kind of like getting out of the way and letting whatever arise? In terms of like when you're doing a tarot card reading, not really making sense.
Well, that's a simple way to put it, but it's more than that. I wouldn't put it that way. That doesn't capture it. There has to be a creative confidence of well, let's see, is that a good way to put it?
Anticipation.
Creative confidence is good enough. So it's not passivity so much as it is confident creativity. It's like a person who's a good musician, you know, they're confident they can step up and play music that they never played before, largely because they're confident they can.
Well, they're confident in that kind of blooming in the moment.
Competent, but
they know that.
Yeah.
They trust you.
Yeah, but it is definitely, it's an improvisation. It's a creativity in that sense because it's in the moment.
And a curiosity, and it's...
Well, all of that. Well, intelligence.
Yeah.
It's just intelligence across the board. Intelligence includes all of those aspects.
It's not passive.
Yeah.
Not being vested or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I think to your point, it really is a trusting of that appearing, which is what you were saying, to get out of the way of, but it's kind of trusting and knowing that you can.
More of like, people say this thing where it's not so much the mind, it's like the heart kind of thing, like, I don't know if that means anything.
I would say you can call it getting out of the way, but there's a confidence that there is something there that you're getting out of the way for. That when you're getting out of the way, it will be the doing.
In anything, like a tarot card reading or like...
Yeah, but it is a kind of a city in the sense that, you know, you have to, I mean, it's a kind of, you could think of it as a kind of priming the pump or something. Anyhow, It's training time, so thank you all very much
Thank
for
you,
coming.
Peter.
Thank you very much.